The plane shuddered violently, alarms blaring, passengers screaming. The captain's voice came through, tense and panicked. Brace for impact. But then, in seat 17B, a young girl with no formal training did something no one expected. She reached over, gripped the controls, and changed the fate of everyone on board. How did she do it? And could she really save them all? The hum of the engines was a familiar comfort, a steady vibration beneath the soles of passengers' feet. Sunlight streamed lazily through the oval windows, catching the occasional glint of a child's toy or a silver ring on someone's hand. Families chatted quietly, business travelers scrolled on tablets, and flight attendants moved efficiently up and down the aisles, offering drinks and reassurance with practiced smiles. In seat 17B, a young girl named Emma adjusted her headphones and gazed out the window. She wasn't supposed to be nervous. She had flown before, but there was something about today, a quiet tension she couldn't name, that made her grip the armrest just a little tighter. Her mother was beside her, reading a book and occasionally glancing at Emma with a small, encouraging smile. Everything seemed normal enough that no one could anticipate the chaos about to erupt. The plane began its climb, engines straining slightly as it ascended through the clouds. Outside, the sky was a perfect canvas of blue, the horizon stretching endlessly. Inside, the cabin buzzed with the low murmur of conversation and the faint clink of beverage carts. The flight attendants moved through the rows with smooth precision, their voices calm and steady. Then, without warning, a violent shudder ran through the plane, jolting passengers in their seats. A collective gasp rose from the cabin as the hum of engines turned into a harsh, grinding roar. Overhead lights flickered. Emma's headphones fell to her lap as the plane pitched sharply to the left, and the tray table in front of her snapped closed with a clang. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." A voice, sharp but strained, came over the intercom. It was the captain, though his words were betrayed by a tremor no passenger should hear. "We are experiencing some technical difficulties. Please, stay seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." Panic began to ripple through the cabin. A man a few rows ahead clutched his armrest so tightly his knuckles went white. A child started crying, and the mother tried to soothe him, her voice quivering despite her efforts. Flight attendants exchanged worried glances, moving quickly but cautiously to reassure the increasingly anxious passengers. Emma's eyes darted toward the cockpit door. Normally, she had no reason to think about what went on behind that closed barrier, but something in her gut told her this wasn't a routine glitch. Her pulse quickened as she noticed the plane's sudden, erratic jerks, an unnatural descent that made the seatbelt tighten uncomfortably across her lap. She tried to remember what she had learned from watching her father, a private pilot, on countless evenings before bed, how he explained controls, instruments, and the calm mindset a pilot needed in emergencies. Names of levers and buttons floated through her memory like fragments from a dream. She hadn't flown a plane herself, but she had absorbed enough knowledge to recognize danger when it arrived. A second, more violent jolt threw passengers forward. Drinks spilled, overhead compartments rattled, and the sound of metal straining echoed through the cabin. A sharp alarm blared, cutting through the cries and murmurs of fear. Emma's heart pounded. She glanced at her mother, who was now gripping her arm tightly, eyes wide with terror. The flight attendants were yelling instructions she barely registered. They themselves were on the edge, struggling to remain composed. Then came the captain's voice again, strained and almost panicked. We've lost altitude. Brace for impact." Emma froze, the words sinking in with bone-deep clarity. This was no minor turbulence. This was life or death. And for a moment, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. If no one could stabilize the plane, no one was coming to save them. The young girl in 17B felt something stir within her, a surge of focus, a clarity amid the chaos that made her realize that the difference between survival and disaster might fall into her hands. Screams echoed through the cabin as passengers lurched forward against their seatbelts. Overhead compartments rattled ominously, and the metallic groan of stressed fuselage added to the cacophony. Flight attendants moved frantically, their practiced calm cracking under the pressure. One shouted, "Stay in your seats. Stay calm." But the words were almost drowned by the rising panic. Emma's mother clutched her hand, eyes wide and filled with terror. "Emma, what do we do?" she cried, her voice trembling. Emma's own heart was hammering, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination lit up. She couldn't stay frozen, couldn't rely solely on fate. She had to think, had to do something. Around her, chaos unfolded like a storm. A man a few rows ahead was shouting at a flight attendant to open the cockpit, demanding answers, while a woman beside him was rocking her infant, trying desperately to calm it. Drink spilled, luggage tumbled from open bins, and the harsh alarms continued their relentless warning. Emma looked toward the cockpit door, now slightly ajar after a violent shudder shook it. The captain's voice came again over the intercom, strained and almost impossible to make out through the panic and the roar of the engines. Emma caught fragments. Control, impossible, losing. The incomplete words sent a chill down her spine. She remembered the diagrams her father had shown her, the instrument panel, the yoke, the throttle, the rudder pedals. Though she had never touched them herself, she recognized the patterns, buttons blinking red, levers stuck in mid-position, warning lights flashing. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the situation from the snippets of memory she had absorbed over the years. Beside her, the cabin trembled again. An overhead panel popped open, spilling magazines onto a man's lap. A flight attendant attempted to calm a terrified passenger, but the words faltered. The plane was descending faster than any normal turbulence should allow. People clutched their neighbors, others screamed into the void, and through it all, Emma's focus sharpened. She scanned the cabin instinctively, noting the positions of crew members, the trajectory of the plane's erratic movements, and the alarms that signaled imminent danger. Her mind calculated, compartmentalized. She had to observe before acting, understand before reaching for control. The captain's voice returned over the intercom, weaker this time, almost a whisper. "We can't maintain altitude. Prepare for impact." Emma's mother gripped her tightly, but Emma gently shook her hand, forcing a look of calm she did not feel herself. "Mom, listen to me," she said, voice steady. "I think I can help. I need you to trust me." Nearby passengers caught fragments of her words, some glancing at her incredulously, others dismissing it in shock. But in that instant, a decision formed in Emma's mind. She would act. If no one else could take the controls, she would. The plane's future, and the lives of everyone aboard, depended on her courage, her instincts, and the fragments of knowledge she had absorbed from watching her father. Her gaze returned to the cockpit door. The plane pitched violently again, a bone-jarring drop that sent every stomach into freefall. Emma braced herself, stomach lurching with the terrifying motion, and steeled her nerves. She could do this. She had to. And in that moment, she rose, not in a literal sense yet, but in resolve, ready to step forward when the time came. The plane lurched violently, tilting sharply to one side. Passengers screamed, flight attendants clung to whatever handholds they could find, and luggage crashed from overhead compartments like cannonballs. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind, surprisingly, felt clear. Amid the chaos, a singular thought crystallized. She had to act. Glancing at her mother, Emma nodded slightly. "I'm going to try," she whispered. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of fear and reluctant trust. Emma rose from her seat, each step a battle against the plane's violent sway. She moved down the narrow aisle, gripping the armrests and seatbacks for support as the cabin rocked and groaned. Around her, passengers scrambled, holding on to each other, their terror palpable. The cockpit door was within reach, slightly ajar after the earlier shudder. Emma's hand trembled as she pushed it fully open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. The captain was slumped over, struggling to regain composure, hands shaking as he tried to manipulate the yoke. Instruments blinked frantically, warning lights glowing like red eyes, and alarms continued their relentless drone. Emma swallowed her fear and stepped forward. Her mind raced, recalling every diagram her father had ever shown her: the throttle, the rudder pedals, the yoke, the instrument panel. She had never flown a plane, but she knew enough to understand what each control did, and she had a singular goal: stabilize the plane. She reached for the yoke cautiously, fingers brushing against its cold surface. Every nerve in her body screamed in protest. This was no simulator, no harmless lesson in a cockpit simulator. Lives depended on her. She exhaled slowly, focusing on the sensations of the plane, its pitch, its roll, the vibrations through the floor. Her instincts kicked in. Slowly, methodically, she made small adjustments, easing the plane's tilt and pushing against the chaotic momentum that threatened to throw them into the clouds, or worse, down toward the ground. The captain looked at her, a mixture of disbelief and desperation. You're too young," he said, voice trembling. Emma's eyes met his, unwavering. "I have to try," she replied simply. No argument, no hesitation, just determination. For the next agonizing moments, Emma worked. She monitored the instruments, adjusted the throttle, and gently corrected the plane's tilt. Each movement was deliberate, each decision critical. Around her, the cabin remained tense. Passengers still clutched their seats, eyes wide, hearts pounding. But the violent drops began to soften, the alarm slowly eased, and a fragile sense of control returned. Emma felt a surge of adrenaline and focus. She wasn't just a child in seat 17B anymore. She was the pilot now, the one responsible for every life aboard. Every adjustment she made carried weight. Every decision could mean survival or disaster. But even in the fear, a strange calmness settled over her. She could do this. She would do this. As the plane steadied, even slightly, a flicker of hope passed through the cabin. Passengers whispered in disbelief, glancing at the cockpit, then back at each other, realizing that somehow, against all odds, the young girl in 17B had taken the first steps towards saving them all.